You are listening to Crime Unraveled, a Buck Taylor novel by Chuck Morgan.
Chapter 5. Buck Taylor was 6 feet tall and weighed 185 pounds, very little flab for a 62-year-old man. Buck's hair was salt and pepper, with what seemed like a lot more salt than pepper, and he wore it longer than was the fashion of the day. Buck was always pleased when he looked in the mirror since, other than getting older, he was in as good a shape as he had been when he played defensive linebacker for the Gunnison High School Cowboys, what seemed like a long time ago. Except for a couple of sore knees coming from age, Buck was in good shape, which was important in his line of work. Buck had been married for 34 years, before breast cancer stole the one person he cared about most in the world. He missed Lucy every day, even after all this time. If you asked Buck, he would tell you that he fell in love with Lucinda Torres on the first day of their senior year in high school. On the other hand, Lucy always told people that Buck stalked her the entire senior year before she gave in to shut her friends up, and agreed to go to the movies with him. She had always considered him just another jock, another football player who was too full of himself. What she found on that first date was a shy, unassuming gentleman who cared more about pleasing her than bragging about his prowess on the football field. She would tell people it was love at first sight that had taken a year to develop. After that, they were inseparable. During senior year, Buck had been approached by several college football scouts who wanted to sign him to play for their schools. Gunnison High School was a small school back in 1978, and Buck and his family were amazed at how many schools had recruited him, but for Buck, college wasn't in the cards. Buck hated school, and spent a lot of time getting himself out of trouble instead of getting an education. When he found something that interested him, he had no problem learning all he could about the subject, but regular schoolwork just bored him. After several long, heartfelt discussions, first with Lucy and then with his parents, he decided to join the Army after graduation. No one was surprised. Buck spent 4 years after high school in the Army, and by the time his enlistment was up, he had been promoted to first sergeant. He spent 3 years of his enlistment in the military police and took to police work. That was when he decided to apply for a position with the Gunnison County Sheriff's Office. Since he was already well known in the county, he had no trouble getting a job as a deputy. He proposed to Lucy the night he received the call that he had gotten the position. His life and career were set. He made the most of his time with the Gunnison County Sheriff's Office, becoming the undersheriff in charge of the investigation division and coming to the attention of the Colorado Bureau of Investigation. Buck had worked with the Colorado Bureau of Investigation on several cases inside the county and had earned the respect of the investigators he had worked with. As twilight started to fall on Buck's career, he knew that unless he wanted to go into politics and run for sheriff, he had reached the highest position in the sheriff's office that he could obtain. He loved his job, but when the first offer came in from CBI, he sat down with Lucy and had a long heart-to-heart talk. He'd spent 17 years in the sheriff's office and had always figured he would retire from that job. They had 3 children, 2 in high school and 1 not far behind, and he was a well-respected member of the community. Did he have the right to disrupt their lives, pick up, move someplace else and start all over? The kids had friends. Lucy owned a small deli ice cream parlor, and they had a nice life. He could stick it out for another 10 years and retire, and they could travel and see the world as they had always planned. Twice he turned down the offer from CBI, although more and more he felt trapped behind a desk instead of doing what he loved, which was investigating crime. The last offer came from Tom Cole, then director of the Colorado Bureau of Investigation. Buck always remembered that day. The Denver Broncos had just lost another game, the 3rd one in a row, and his friends had all packed up and headed home when there was a knock at the front door. Now, anyone who lives in a small community knows that no one ever uses the front door, and no one ever knocks. So who could this be this late on a Sunday evening? Buck answered the door, and was surprised to see the director of the Colorado Bureau of Investigation standing on his front porch. The director smiled and said, "Before you close the door in my face, please listen to my offer." Buck invited him in, and he and Lucy sat on the couch and listened as the director laid out his plan. He was opening a new branch office in Grand Junction, Colorado, that would house 5 agents and a small forensic unit. Buck could continue to live in Gunnison, but would have to report to the office in Grand Junction twice a month. Otherwise, he would be free to work from his house. There would be no disruption in his life, other than spending time on the road as his investigations warranted. He would work alone, but would have all the branch office's resources at his disposal. Before Buck could say a word, Lucy said, "Buck, this is what you have been waiting for, a chance to be a real investigator again. You have to take this." That was one of the things that made him love Lucy every day. She always knew what he was thinking and understood what drove him. She had nailed it this time. Buck looked at the director and replied, "Well, I guess it's settled. Looks like you have a new investigator on your team." That was 23 years ago, and Buck had never looked back. He had made the most of those years and was one of the most respected and feared investigators in the state, but all that work couldn't make up for the loss he suffered. Lucy was diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer following a routine mammogram, and they set off together on their next adventure, the quest to beat the dreaded disease. After a double mastectomy and 5 years of chemo, they knew their time was drawing to a close when the cancer returned several times to her brain and was no longer controlled by the radiation. Together, they decided to stop all treatment, even though they had always told the family that the decision was Lucy's alone to make. Lucy spent the last couple of months of her life taking care of her small business and spending as much time as possible with her children and grandchildren. The end came one spring night. Lucy had been sleeping on and off for 20 or so hours a day in the end. The night she died, Buck had been lying in bed next to her reading a report, when she snuggled into his arms and rested her head on his shoulder. Sometime during the night, Buck had fallen asleep. When he woke up, Lucy was gone, and his world was shattered. They say that time heals all wounds, but Buck wasn't sure that was the case when you lost your closest friend. And even now, all these years later, he missed her more and more each day. Buck always thought back to that Sunday morning, when the family had gathered for a private ceremony at the little dock along the Gunnison River to scatter Lucy's ashes. Each family member got to say a few words about Lucy, and when they finished and turned to go, they were stunned to see several hundred of their neighbors and friends standing behind them in the park. Word had gotten out about their private service, and everyone turned out to pay tribute to Lucy. The affair turned into a huge party, with plenty of food and drinks. Lucy never wanted any kind of service, but Buck figured she would have loved this spontaneous outpouring of love.
Thank you for listening to this chapter of Crime Unraveled, a Buck Taylor novel by Chuck Morgan. You can find the entire crime series as well as other novels by Chuck Morgan at chuckmorganbooks.com or on Amazon.